Modern birth control comes with doctors, pharmacies, apps, warning labels, and awkward conversations. Ancient people had scrolls, plants, rumors, elders, moon calendars, and one very confident guy in sandals. This is not a how-to guide, because ancient birth control was often unreliable, risky, or just historically weird. It is a story about people trying to control family size before modern medicine existed. Before modern medicine, avoiding pregnancy was not a lifestyle trend. It could be about hunger, health, survival, power, marriage, money, and one more baby than the household could feed. A modern person might check a health app. An ancient person might ask an elder, consult a market seller, stare at the moon, and hope the advice was not terrible. Some ancient ideas came from observation. Some came from tradition. Some came from panic wearing a fancy robe. And some ideas were so questionable they deserve their own ancient warning committee. To understand ancient family planning, we have to start with the obvious problem. Pregnancy and childbirth could be dangerous long before hospitals, surgery, antibiotics, and modern emergency care. Another baby also meant another mouth to feed. In a wealthy household, that might mean more servants, more inheritance arguments, and more family politics. In a poor household, it might mean thinner soup. Spacing children mattered because one exhausted mother could not safely do everything forever. Women carried much of the physical risk, but families, husbands, elders, and communities also had opinions, pressure, and expectations. Ancient love could be romantic, but ancient family planning was rarely just romantic. A couple might want a child, delay a child, or fear another child. That choice was often tangled with food, health, labor, marriage, and survival. If food was low, another pregnancy could feel terrifying. If a mother was exhausted, another pregnancy could feel impossible. Avoiding pregnancy could be about survival, not selfishness. In the ancient world, family planning was not convenience. It was risk management with very bad paperwork. So what did ancient people actually try? They had plants. They had barriers. They had timing ideas. They had abstinence, avoidance, and awkward negotiations. They had rituals, charms, prayers, and advice that sounded more confident than it deserved. They had elders who remembered what their elders remembered. They had sellers who made mysterious things sound very expensive. Some methods tried to prevent pregnancy physically. Some relied on plants people believed affected the body. Some relied on observing cycles, seasons, or patterns. Some relied on spiritual protection. Some relied on a man saying, "Trust me," which is rarely a great scientific method. This is where the ancient bad idea committee enters. The committee had one job: look at a method and ask, are we absolutely sure about this? Most of the time, the answer was no. History explains these ideas, but history does not recommend copying them. Ancient Egypt gives us some of the earliest written evidence that people were thinking about pregnancy prevention. Ancient papyri mention fertility, pregnancy, and methods that modern viewers should absolutely not try. The details can sound shocking because ancient medicine was working with limited knowledge. The safe version is simple: people were experimenting. The unsafe version is everything else. In Greece and Rome, writers discussed plants, timing, barriers, and advice with impressive confidence. Silphium became legendary. People talked about it like a plant with celebrity status. It was valuable, mysterious, and connected to love, medicine, and reproductive control. But today, we are not even fully sure exactly what silphium was. That is a problem when someone claims the magic plant definitely worked. Greek doctors wrote with confidence. Roman advice givers sounded confident. Marketplace sellers looked confident. But confidence was not the same as science. The most important experts were not always the men writing scrolls. They were often women talking to women. Mothers, grandmothers, midwives, sisters, and older friends carried practical knowledge through memory. A young woman might ask a question in a private courtyard, not in a public debate hall. The answer might include warnings, family advice, experience, and fear. This knowledge was quiet because the topic was sensitive. It was also powerful because pregnancy affected women's bodies most directly. A midwife could know which advice was common, which was dangerous, and which was probably nonsense. An elder could remember who suffered, who recovered, and what the family learned. A sister could whisper what nobody would say out loud. A friend could say, "Do not trust that market seller with the dramatic eyebrows." Not every piece of knowledge was correct, but the network mattered. It gave women language for risk. It gave families ways to discuss timing, survival, and pressure. Some ancient ideas had a little logic. People noticed that timing mattered. They noticed that breastfeeding sometimes spaced births. They noticed that some materials could act like barriers. They noticed that certain plants affected bodies in strong ways. But noticing is not the same as testing. Ancient people did not have hormones, microscopes, lab trials, or controlled studies. They had patterns, memory, coincidence, and someone's cousin's confident story. That means some ideas were partly logical. Some ideas were completely symbolic. Some ideas were dangerous. And some ideas were probably invented by one overconfident uncle at dinner. The hard part is judging the past without pretending it had modern science. Ancient people were not stupid. They were solving an enormous problem with very limited tools. Ancient trial and error was sometimes clever, sometimes desperate, and sometimes a terrible meeting with plants. The biggest missing tool was reliable science. No one could run modern clinical trials. No one could measure effectiveness with accurate data. No one could separate coincidence from cause. If a method seemed to work once, it might become tradition. If it failed, the blame could fall on the woman, the gods, bad timing, or the wrong ritual. That made reproductive control unreliable. It also made it unfair. Wealth could buy privacy, better care, and more options. Poor families had fewer choices and more pressure. Women often carried the physical burden. Families carried the economic burden. Communities carried the social consequences. Ancient people wanted certainty. But before modern medicine, certainty was rare. Control was limited, messy, unequal, and full of question marks. So how did ancient people avoid pregnancy before modern medicine? The honest answer is, imperfectly. They used a mix of plants, barriers, timing, abstinence, rituals, advice, memory, and hope. Some ideas came from observation. Some came from fear. Some came from religion. Some came from marketplace confidence. Some came from women's experience. And some should be filed permanently under please do not try this. The story is funny because ancient advice could be wildly awkward. But it is also serious because the need was real. Behind every strange method was a person trying to manage risk. Ancient birth control was not just about romance. Final answer. Ancient people avoided pregnancy with a risky mix of knowledge, myth, experiment, community memory, and hope before modern medicine finally changed the rules.